The horrors of war are indivisible. We all want peace, but not peace at any price. Peace with justice and freedom. We seek agreement with the Soviet Union on arms control. We want to reduce the levels of both conventional and nuclear forces, but those reductions must be mutual. They must be balanced and they must be verifiable. Oh, I understand the feelings of the unilateralists. I understand the anxieties of parents with children growing up in the nuclear age. But the question, the fundamental question for all of us, is whether unilateral nuclear disarmament would make war less likely. I have to tell you, it would not. It would make war more likely. Aggressors attack because they think they are going to win, and they're more likely to attack the weak than they are to attack the strong. The springs of war lie not in arms races, real or imaginary, but in the readiness to use force or threaten force against other nations. Remember what Bismarck said. Do I want war? Of course not. I want victory. The causes of wars in the past haven't changed, as we know to our cost. But because Russia and the West know there can be no victory in nuclear war, for 37 years we have kept the peace in Europe, and that is no mean achievement. That is why we need nuclear weapons, because having them makes peace more secure. Yet at Blackpool last week, the Labour Party, by a huge majority, adopted a new official defence policy. It went like this: Polaris to be scrapped, Triton to be cancelled, cruise missiles in service to be removed. It's now clear beyond doubt that given the change the Labour Party wants, they would dismantle Britain's defences wholesale. And yet, do you remember how Anar in Bevan pleaded with an earlier Labour Party conference not to send a Labour Foreign Secretary naked into the conference chamber? Well, it's a good thing there isn't going to be a Labour Foreign Secretary. And yet the Labour Party wants to keep Britain in NATO, continuing to shelter behind American nuclear weapons so long as they're not on our soil. What utter hypocrisy! To expect an insurance policy, but to refuse to pay the premium. Yeah. There must be millions of Labour supporters who are thoroughly disheartened by what they saw at Blackpool last week. I say to them, forget about the militant tendency, come over and join the Tory tendency. Mr. President, a strong and united Western alliance is a guarantee of our peace and security. It is also a beacon of hope to the oppressed people of the Soviet bloc. Mr. President, Britain is a reliable ally, and with a Conservative government will always remain so. Reliable in NATO, reliable beyond NATO, an ally and a friend to be trusted. And trusted not least by our partners in the European community. Of course, ancient nations do not always find it easy to live together. Yet our commitment to the common market is clear. We are all democratic countries where freedom and the rule of law are basic to our institutions. At present, as you know, Britain pays quite large sums to community partners often richer than we ourselves. That is fundamentally unjust. It's also short-sighted. As you know, we've just come to the end of our first three-year arrangement. We shall really have to fight, courteously of course, to make sure that we have a fair deal for the future. But those who would pull us out of Europe must come to terms with the damage that that would do to our people. Even the threat of withdrawal destroys jobs. Firms that invest in the common market often decide to come to Britain. Labour's threat to withdraw makes companies hesitate and look elsewhere. That Labour threat is losing us jobs now. Mr. President, the great economies of Germany and France, once the engine of growth of the European community, are struggling with declining output and a growing army of unemployed. Across the Atlantic, the United States, Canada, and the countries of Latin America, they've been faced with the most prolonged slump for 50 years. Even the miracle economies of the Pacific Basin, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Singapore, even they are now being hit. But the economies of the Eastern Bloc are in a far worse state than the West. Poland and Romania are hard-pressed to pay their debts, and the Soviet bloc countries generally are riven with shortages of everything from seed corn to sewing thread. Of course, none of us foresaw a world recession of such gravity. Last week in Blackpool, the opposition suggested that I single-handed had brought it about. What powers they attribute to me. If I had that sort of power, I would banish recession forever. But we've no time for dreams and delusions. The main culprit, and there are others, but the main culprit is the greatest sustained inflation in modern times. Almost every developed country has suffered from it. For more than a decade, economic growth has been thwarted. For more than a decade, savers in America and Europe have been systematically robbed by the steady erosion of their savings. And for more than a decade, the ranks of the unemployed have swollen in the wake of inflation. In 1979, many of us in Europe began the long, hard job of wringing inflation out of the system. As you know, governments had promised to do this over and over again. But when the going got tough, they resorted to the printing press. No wonder people became cynical. Journalists, many but not all of them on the left, were almost daily predicting U-turns. Some indeed confidently went around the bend.